Have you ever felt afraid to speak English? I did too. But today, I'll show you how you can learn it in a way that's fun and effective. Let's start this exciting journey together. I still remember the first time I opened a book in English. I was about 10 years old, sitting in my classroom, feeling like I was looking at a completely different language. I could barely understand anything. The words seemed like they were written in a code only a few people could crack. English felt like an impossible mountain, and I was at the very bottom, looking up, feeling lost. But what I didn't know back then was that this feeling of confusion would eventually lead to something amazing. Through patience, consistency, and a few clever strategies, I not only learned English, but began to love the process of learning it. Now, as an adult, I'm fluent, and I can say without hesitation that mastering English has opened up opportunities in ways I never imagined. But it wasn't easy. I had my fair share of struggles, moments where I wanted to quit, and doubts about whether it would ever get easier. In this post, I want to share the methods that worked for me, the struggles I overcame, and tips that can help you too. Whether you're just starting or you've been learning English for a while, these strategies will help you take your skills to the next level. So, grab a cup of coffee, get comfortable, and let's dive into how I learned English and how you can too. Step 1. Start with listening. The power of absorbing English. Every day, when I first started learning English, I realized something important. I didn't need to start speaking right away. In fact, listening was the most crucial part of learning any language. At first, I thought I had to memorize grammar rules and vocabulary, but what I didn't know at the time was that listening came first. I began listening to English songs, podcasts, audiobooks, and radio stations, even though I barely understood anything. At first, it was like listening to music in a language I didn't know, but over time, my brain started to recognize patterns, intonation, and the rhythm of the language. It was like learning to dance. The more I listened, the more I started to feel comfortable with the flow of English. Tip: don't worry if you don't understand everything at first. The goal is to get used to the sounds of the language. Choose something that interests you. If you love sports, listen to English commentary on games. If you enjoy technology, listen to tech podcasts. The key is to keep listening, even if you don't catch every word. Over time, you'll start picking up more and more. One of my favorite ways to practice listening was watching movies and TV shows in English. I started with animated shows because they often use clear and simple language. Shows like Friends or How I Met Your Mother helped me get used to different accents and everyday conversations. I would watch these shows with subtitles at first and then gradually turn the subtitles off as I got more confident. Pro tip: use subtitles in English. It's tempting to rely on subtitles in your native language, but watching with English subtitles is much more effective. This way, you can match the spoken words to the text, helping you understand pronunciation and context. Step 2. Reading. The secret to expanding your vocabulary. The next step in my language journey was reading. While listening helped me with understanding the sounds and rhythm of English, reading expanded my vocabulary and gave me more exposure to sentence structures. At first, I was overwhelmed by the idea of reading a full book in English, but I started small. I chose simple books, often children's books, because the language was clear and the stories were engaging. One of the first books I read in English was The Cat in the Hat by Dr. Seuss. The language was simple, but the illustrations helped me understand what was going on. As I gained confidence, I moved on to slightly more challenging books. I remember reading Harry Potter in English for the first time. I had already seen the movie, so I could guess some of the meanings of the words, but it was still challenging. However, that challenge made it exciting. I felt proud every time I finished a chapter, even if I didn't understand every single word. Tip: start with books you're already familiar with. Whether it's a novel you love or a movie you've seen many times, knowing the story in your native language will make it easier to understand the new vocabulary in English. But reading books wasn't the only way I practiced my reading. I started reading everywhere. I read signs, posters, labels on food, instructions on my phone, and online articles. Every time I saw English, I tried to read it, even if it was just a sentence or two. This helped me learn new words, idioms, and expressions in real-world context. Pro tip: don't be afraid to use a dictionary, but also try to guess the meaning of words based on context. This skill is essential because in real life, you won't always have a dictionary on hand. Step 3. Writing, expressing myself, and getting comfortable with mistakes. The next step in my journey was writing. This is where I really started to see improvements in my fluency. Writing wasn't easy at first. I was nervous about making mistakes, and I was unsure if I was using the right grammar. But one of the best things about writing is that it gives you the time and space to think about what you want to say. It allows you to practice without the pressure of real-time conversation. I started by keeping a simple journal. I wrote about my day, my thoughts, and anything that came to mind. At first, my writing was basic. I would write a few sentences a day, but slowly I started adding more details, and I began experimenting with more complex sentence structures. Tip: start small. Write a few sentences every day. Over time, try to write paragraphs. Don't worry about making mistakes. The goal is to get comfortable expressing yourself in writing. If possible, find a language exchange partner or a tutor who can help correct your writing and give you feedback. I also started writing emails and messages in English. I would write to my English-speaking friends or participate in online forums. Even though I was sometimes nervous about my grammar or word choice, I learned that the most important thing was communication. As long as I could express my ideas clearly, I was on the right track. Pro tip: use writing as a way to practice grammar and sentence structure. If you're unsure about something, look it up. Practice makes perfect, and writing consistently will help you improve. Step 4. Speaking, the ultimate test of fluency. Speaking English was always the most intimidating part of learning for me. I was terrified of making mistakes and sounding silly. But I soon realized that the more I spoke, the better I got. I started speaking English as much as possible. I practiced with my friends who spoke English, and even when I felt shy, I would make an effort to engage in conversations. I remember having my first full conversation in English with an exchange student who was visiting my school. I was nervous, but it was exhilarating to speak in English without worrying too much about grammar. Tip: don't wait until you're perfect to start speaking. The best way to improve your speaking skills is to practice. Start by speaking to yourself, practicing pronunciation, and using the phrases you've learned. I also took advantage of language exchange platforms and apps. Websites like Tandem or HelloTalk helped me find native speakers who were willing to chat with me. These conversations were invaluable because they allowed me to practice real-world English with people from different backgrounds. Pro tip: try to mimic the pronunciation and intonation of native speakers. It can feel awkward at first, but doing so will help you sound more natural and confident. Step 5. Immersion. Surround yourself with English everywhere. One of the most effective ways to accelerate your English learning is through immersion. At first, this sounds intimidating. After all, how can you be immersed in a language when you live in a country where it's not spoken? The good news is that immersion doesn't have to be about living in an English-speaking country. You can create your own immersion environment by surrounding yourself with English in every part of your life. Tip: change the language settings on your phone, computer, and apps to English. Listen to English podcasts and watch English movies during your free time. Read the news in English, even if you don't understand everything. The more English you're exposed to, the faster you'll learn. I found that immersion helped me learn faster than anything else. For example, I began to watch all of my favorite TV shows and movies in English. When I heard words or phrases I didn't know, I would quickly look them up and add them to my vocabulary. Even though it felt overwhelming at first, over time, I became used to hearing English in every aspect of my life. Pro tip: try to think in English as much as possible. It's a challenge at first, but the more you do it, the more fluent you'll become. Start by thinking about simple things in English, like what to have for breakfast or